Welcome to Too Fond of Books. My name is Janelle and this is an Agatha Christie video. I'm going to talk about 3 Agatha Christie books that I have read recently. They are all Poirots and this is part of my Agatha Christie Read-through project. So I've got my Agatha Christie Read-through project notebook here that I love. I think this is a great notebook. So I read recently, the 3 that I read were Cards on the Table, 1937, Murder in the Mews, and Poirot Loses a Client. These are all from 1937. They are all Poirot. And I think I've said before when I talked about my Agatha Christie Read-through project that I've been looking at the Agatha Christie universe as I read through these books. One of the things that I've been watching for is the universe. So in the Agatha Christie universe, do all of these people live in the same universe? What are the connections between the various series and characters that she writes about in her books? And there was some really interesting connections in a couple of these books as far as the Agatha Christie universe goes. And so I have made a little clip here. I decided to draw out, it was getting confusing, so I thought I would draw it out so I could visually see where the connections were in the Agatha Christie universe. So I'm going to include that clip in here right now. This is what my Agatha Christie universe map looks like so far. As you can see, there are a lot of connections between the various characters in her various series. Now, Cards on the Table from 1937, which I'm going to talk about in this video, was huge for the universe map because Poirot, Ariadne Oliver, Superintendent Battle, and Colonel Race all get invited to a dinner party where the host is murdered. And so by putting those 4 people all together in one book, the universe map just expanded like you wouldn't believe. There are some interesting things that I have noted so far. Mr. Satterthwaite, I'm going to zoom in a little bit here. He is from the Mr. Quinn short stories, and so far the only connection there is with Poirot, but Satterthwaite boy, I have a hard time saying that name. He shows up in 2 different books so far. He shows up in Murder in 3 Acts in 1934, and then Dead Man's Mirror in 1937. So that's an interesting connection. Also, a connection that I am not entirely sure of yet is Parker Pyne. Now, Parker Pyne, he's the yellow one there at the bottom if you can't read that very well. So those short stories, there's a connection to Ariadne Oliver in those because he asks her to help him out as a mystery writer. But there is a potential connection with Poirot because Parker Pyne has a secretary called Miss Lemon. And Poirot, in some of the later novels, also has a secretary called Miss Lemon. And I've wondered if it's the same. I haven't been able to confirm that, and that's why it's a dotted line. The other very interesting thing is, so far there's all of these connections, but Tommy and Tuppence are the outliers. The only connection I have found so far for them is to Poirot, but interestingly enough, they see Poirot as a fictional detective. So in the book Partners in Crime, they investigate various cases as if they were different fictional detectives. And one of the cases, the man who was number 16, they investigate as Hercule Poirot. So therefore, he is fictional, and so that gets a dotted line as well. I thought that was very interesting. So anyway, that is my Agatha Christie Universe. Cards on the Table from 1937. This is a Poirot, and like I said in the clip, this is a great book for the Agatha Christie universe because Mr. Shaitana invites Poirot, Ariadne Oliver, Colonel Race, and Superintendent Battle to a dinner party, where he has also invited 4 people that he believes have gotten away with murder. So by Agatha Christie putting those 4 detectives in this book, she has made so many connections in the Agatha Christie universe. I love it a lot. So Ariadne Oliver, in this book, it said that she met Poirot at a literary dinner. And we know Ariadne Oliver from the Parker Pyne book from 1932. Superintendent Battle, it is said that he knows Poirot, but it's not specified how he knows him. Superintendent Battle we've met before in The Secret of Chimneys from 1925 and The Seven Dials Mystery from 1929. Colonel Race, it's said in this book that he has not met Poirot, but Poirot knew something of him. So it's not specific, but that's what it says. And we've met Colonel Race in the 1924 book, The Man in the Brown Suit. So this was a good solid Agatha Christie mystery. So after dinner, Shaitana sets up some bridge tables, but he puts them in 2 separate rooms. And so at one table, he has the 4 detectives playing bridge together. And then at another table in a different room, he has the 4 would-be murderers playing bridge together. And at some point in the evening, someone murders Mr. Shaitana. And so this was really good, but I only gave it 3.5 stars because there's an awful lot about bridge in this book, and you kind of have to know a little bit about bridge, like how Poirot solves the mystery is connected to how people played the game and things that happened during the game. And so because I don't know anything about bridge, I felt a little bit lost. And so that's why I only gave it 3.5 stars. But otherwise, it was a good, solid mystery that I really enjoyed. Also, an interesting note, the adaptation with David Suchet, it's different. It has a different ending. And I think that that's interesting. That doesn't happen very often in the David Suchet adaptations, but in this case, it's true. I thought it was interesting, the events of the ABC murders are mentioned by a guest at the dinner table in this book. And also, as a way of describing Shaitana and his character, he is often described as Mephistophelian, Mephistophelian, I think is how you say it, which basically just means wicked or fiendish. And so that's a reference to Mephistopheles from Faust. And so I thought that that was interesting because that's a great way to describe someone, but potentially, what's the word that I'm looking for? Not everyone will know who Mephistopheles is. And so it's a great way to describe someone, but it's not a reference that everyone would necessarily get. I also loved that there was a nod to a fellow member of the detection club in this book. One of her characters is called Anne Meredith, and Anne Meredith is a member of the detection club, and she wrote Portrait of a Murderer. So I thought that it was kind of cool that Agatha Christie kind of gave a nod to one of her fellow Detection Club members in this book. So yeah, 3.5 stars. And in my ratings, I now have 30 books in my list of ratings, and Cards on the Table sits at 15 in that list. Then I read Murder in the Mews, and this is the facsimile edition, and I love these facsimile editions. They are exactly what the original edition looked like, and I just love that. And on the back here, there's a quote from Nicholas Blake. Nicholas Blake in The Spectator said, "Before her fertility of invention, the average detection writer can only bite the dust." Before her fertility of invention, the average detection writer can only bite the dust. The store of plots she keeps under her hat is nobody's business, and with the light patter and deceptive legerdemain of a first-rate conjurer, she goes on producing out of this inexhaustible hat the oddest, most exciting objects. So, Murder in the Mews is 4 Poirot stories. I would call them long short stories because they're too short to be novellas, although one of them comes close. So I gave this one 4 stars. And short stories aren't necessarily my favorite, but these were longer short stories, so I tended to like them more, and I thought they were just really solid outings. So the first one was Murder in the Mews, which was 70 pages long. Poirot and Japp investigate in that one, and a woman is found dead in her house, and she died the night of Bonfire Night, so November 5th. And Poirot and Japp are walking home. I believe they had been out to dinner, and they are discussing, this is great, Poirot committing murder. Let's see, I think I marked it here. No, I didn't. But I do think that that's hilarious. They discuss Poirot committing murder. And that's not the first time something like that has come up in a Poirot. Oh yeah. So, "Good night for a murder," remarked Japp with professional interest. "Nobody would hear a shot, for instance, on a night like this. It has always seemed odd to me that more criminals do not take advantage of the fact," said Hercule Poirot. "Do you know, Poirot, I almost wish sometimes that you would commit murder." "Mon cher! Yes, I'd like to see just how you'd set about it. My dear Japp, if I committed a murder, you would not have the least chance of seeing how I set about it. You would not even be aware, probably, that a murder had been committed." So yeah, that was pretty good. The second story in here is called The Incredible Theft, and that one is 63 pages long. And in this book, it's more of a political theft story. There's people at a house, country house, and some plans, submarine plans or something, go missing. And so one of the things that I've watched for in Poirot's anyway are, as an investigator, it seems to me, the more I read of Poirot, that he is more interested in the truth. That when he is investigating, he wants to find the truth. And so I watch for stuff like that when I read. And in this one, they talk about bringing in Poirot. "This man, Hercule Poirot," and the other man says, "will come down here and produce the plans like a conjurer taking rabbits out of his hat, I suppose. He'll get at the truth, and the truth is what we want. Look here, Charles, I take all responsibility on myself." So they talk about bringing in Poirot because he will get at the truth. And then also, later on in the story, there's another mention of truth. And someone says, and the case is not ended at all. Yes, it is ended. I, Hercule Poirot, know the truth. And then the third story in here is called Dead Man's Mirror, and that one is 95 pages, and that one I think was my favorite of the stories. This one was set in Italy, I think, Italy. Oh no, sorry, that's the last book. In this book, Poirot gets a letter to come see somebody, and when Poirot gets there, that person has been killed. But in this one, he seeks out Mr. Satterthwaite for information. And Mr. Satterthwaite is from the Mr. Quin book from 1930. He escaped from several important and splendid beings, a famous diplomat, an equally famous actress, and a well-known sporting peer, and found at last the person he had come to seek, that invariably also present guest, Mr. Satterthwaite. The Dead Man's Mirror is a locked room mystery, and there's a reference to Tennyson's poem, The Mirror Cracked from Side to Side, A Curse Has Come Upon Me, that poem, which is also referenced in the Marple story, The Mirror Cracked from 1962. And then the final story, in the book is the Triangle at Rhodes, which is 31 pages, and Poirot is on holiday in Italy. So yeah, Murder at the Mews, this was a really solid outing of 4 long short stories that I really quite enjoyed. And on my rankings, which is currently at 30, I've put it at 19. And then finally, Poirot Loses a Client, which is also called Dumb Witness. This is narrated by Hastings. Yay! I love it when she brings Hastings back because the two of them together are gold. So it's in first person. However, the first 4 chapters, you think they're third person because Hastings and Poirot don't appear in the story until the 5th chapter. And so you don't start getting the eyes, I did this, I did that, until the 5th chapter. And so it appears that it's third person until the 5th chapter when you realize that it's first person and Hastings is narrating the story. This one, there was a lot of mention of Poirot's style of investigation, which is order and method, how important that is to him, order and method. So he gets a letter from a woman 3 months after the date on the letter, and when he goes to see her, discovers that she is dead. And so he decides to still investigate because he feels like he owes that to her. There is a lot in this book about truth and lies, which I thought was interesting. And Poirot says, page 223, there's specifically about the truth. He says, I am on no one's side, madame. I am always on the side of truth. There's a few other things that I marked in here. I thought this was funny. She had no idea, the other sister reiterated. She never thought of such a thing happening. That is what she told you, yes? Oh yes, she repeated it several times, and that's what makes it so wicked of the Arundel family to go on as they have done. cold-shouldering her and treating her with suspicion. After all, this is a free country. English people seem to labor under that misapprehension, murmured Poirot. I'm sorry, I thought that was very funny. And then, near the end, Poirot says, then he paused, cleared his throat once more, and went on. I am now going to take you over the ground I traveled to get at the truth. I am going to show you what I believe to be a true reconstruction of the facts of the case. And so for him, for Poirot, it does seem that the truth is what is most important. Not necessarily justice, which I think is interesting, but the truth. He wants to get at the truth. He wants the truth to be known. And so this, I gave Poirot Loses a Client 3.5 stars. It was a good, solid Poirot mystery. And in my rankings, it's currently 20 out of 30. So, those are my most recent Agatha Christie's. Have you read either of any of these three Agatha Christie's? What were your thoughts? Did you like them? I think they were kind of all around the same ranking for me. Good solid Poirots. Have you read any of these three? I'd love to hear what you thought about them in the comment section, and I will see you for another video soon. Bye.